This program has been made possible in part by Webb's, America's Yarn Store, a source for knitting and crocheting yarns and supplies, yarn.com.
Welcome to another episode of Knitting Daily. I'm your host, Uni Zhang. On today's show, we're topping it off with fun hat designs and finishing techniques. I'll get started with the silver lining hat, a football-shaped headpiece that turns into a fun hat with minimal finishing. This project is perfect for the novice knitter. Then, on today's how-to segment, we'll explore beret fashions with authors and designers Courtney Kelly and Kate Gagnon Osborne. They'll demonstrate their Yvette beret. On the next installment of Crochet Edgings and Trims with Kristen Omdahl and Shay Pendre, they'll turn things around with bottom-up edging techniques. Kristen demonstrates a foundation stitch that creates a picot edging. And finally, I'll add in some fun elements for all fiber artists with a lesson in making pom-poms without any special equipment. So let's take a look at this hat. This is a really basic hat design, and we're actually going to walk all the way through the entire hat. The very first thing that you're going to want to do is start with a cast on. We're going to be knitting this hat in the round, which ordinarily you would use double-pointed needles to start a cast on. But because we start from so small of a circumference, I've got a trick for you, and that's to use a long circular needle rather than double-pointed needles, just to get started. We're going to cast on 8 stitches, and we're just going to do so with an ordinary long tail cast on. So you're going to fold your yarn around your right needle and hook your yarn with the tail around your thumb and the ball end around your index finger. Pull your needle back. You're going to come up through your thumb loop, grab the nearest leg of your index finger loop and drop the loop off your thumb. Pull tight, and you've cast it on 1 stitch. We're going to do that again, up through the thumb loop, grab the index loop, pull it tight. 3 stitches. We're going to cast on 1 more, and that's 4 stitches for the first half of your hat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide these down my circular needle, kind of just to the middle of the cable, making sure not to twist anything. I'm going to bring my right needle around and kind of just lay it there so that I can keep my cast on edge tight. I'm going to start casting on again. I'm going to cast on 4 more stitches. And this is the beginning of our hat. The reason that we're doing this on a circular needle instead of onto double-pointed needles, which is what you would usually use for small circumferences, is because it can be really tricky to maneuver 4 or 5 needles at the same time when you're working on such a small number of stitches. The needles don't really have enough of a foundation, and so they kind of clatter all over the place and it's easy to get tangled up. So what I've done here is I've moved my first half of the stitches up onto my other needle. You can see right here that how we're going to join this in a circle. And then I'm going to slide my second half of stitches onto my cable. You may have seen this technique called magic loop, and it's often used to knit socks. So we're going to start with our very first round of stitches. We have 8 stitches on our needle, and we're going to increase right away. And all the increases in this hat are made in exactly the same way. You're going to insert your right needle as if to knit into your first stitch. You're going to knit as normal, pulling a yarn through or pulling a loop through, but you're not going to drop that stitch off the left needle yet. You're going to reinsert your right needle into the back of the stitch. And for this first round of stitches, the stitches can be a little bit tight, so you might need to just maneuver a little bit. So you can see here that 1 stitch has become 2. Now we need to place a marker because this hat is sectioned off into 8 sections, and we're going to repeat that all the way around, placing a marker after each pair of stitches. So again, knit into the back loop, place a marker, knit into the front, knit into the back. And then we don't actually need to place a marker after this needle. Because we have half of our stitches on each needle, there's sort of a natural delineation point. So now we're going to work our other half of our stitches up onto the other circular needle. And this can be a little bit tricky too, especially when you're working with such a thin yarn. So just make sure to do it carefully and gently so that you're not actually stretching the stitches out of shape. So we push them up onto the other needle, then you can pull the needle through the other stitches. They're sitting on the cable, and then we can do exactly the same thing. So again, we're going to knit into the front and then into the back of the first stitch. Place a marker, front and back, and then all the way around. And you're going to alternate these rounds where you increase one stitch within each of these alternating sections with plain knit rounds. So you'll be increasing by 8 stitches on every other round. After a while, you can move away from using the magic loop and onto double pointed needles. And I just want you to note here how my stitches are set up on my double pointed needles. I've got 2 sort of increase sections set on each needle, but you'll notice that I don't have markers between the sections, between this section and this section. And obviously that's because the gap in the double pointed needles kind of sets off that section for you, so you don't really need to place a marker there. If you take a closer look at the fabric, you can see here how we've increased 1 stitch and then alternated it with a plain knitting round. So the increases happen all the way up along those sections. So once your hat is at the full number of increases, we've increased it from 2 stitches to 18 stitches in each section, you can go ahead and move on to a short circular needle of the same diameter. So to do this, all you need to do is just simply knit from your double points right onto your circular needle. But something that you will need to do is start placing those markers at the gaps, because obviously a circular needle doesn't have gaps when you're not working in the magic loop technique, but rather just with using the full length of your needle. So I'm going to knit all the way to the end, and you'll see what I mean. So we've got 18 stitches in each section. Our hat is at its full circumference, and now we've reached the end of one needle. This is a full section, so you're going to go ahead and place a marker right in there, and then you can just knit on. One tip that I have for you is to actually go ahead and have just one marker that's different that you can place here when you've reached the end of your round to delineate the beginning of each round. When you've finished knitting all the increases of the hat, you can take a look on this hat that's almost done here. What we just showed you on the double pointed needles is kind of this section of the hat. If we spread it flat, you can really see that. Once you've gotten to that diameter for the hat, or that circumference for the hat, you're just going to knit straight for 12 inches. Then you're going to change colors and do exactly the same thing, but in reverse. You're going to knit straight for 12 inches in the same color, and then you're going to work decreases instead of increases, and that's going to give you the exact same circle shape on this side. Once you've decreased all the way down, and you'll be doing exactly the same thing, decreasing 1 stitch in each section until you've got just 2 stitches in each section. And once you've gotten to that point, all you need to do is thread your tail onto your needle. And I just want to make sure that you can say we're going to knit, you'll want to knit about 6 inches in each color straight so that you have a total of 12 inches. Whoops. Once you've got just a few stitches left on your needles, you're going to want to cut your yarn, thread your tail onto a tapestry needle, and then you can simply run your needle through all of the stitches that are left on the needle, making sure to go in a circle and turn that corner, and then you'll weave in your end. And you've got this shape that doesn't really look like a hat yet. You say, I thought that this segment was about a hat. Well, all you need to do is open up kind of this football shape that you've got, turn one half inside of the other, and you've got this great double layered hat that you can turn up to have a contrast brim. The pattern's on the website if you'd like to follow along.